Accessing agent files. Brian Sovryn. Early 21st century anarchist. Creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now here's Brian.
The golden stallion, the man of tomorrow, the Nostradamus of technology, the one that some have even called Sovzu, is here for you. And like Patrick Swayze said to Baby in Dirty Dancing, I've had the time of my life, because woo boy, did I have a hell of a conversation in a direct message on Twitter this week, and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. Hypercronius is out there. If you weren't aware of that yet, it is available. Go to zog.ninja. You can grab your copy. You can use the code SVT and you can get $1 off. Or I was on the Edgington Post this week to talk about it. That's Free Talk Live's Edgington Post with my one-time co-host Mark Edge from Free Talk Live. Had a great time talking about the game. A lot of people got really interested about it, because for once, the anarchists are heroes in the game. We got that going on. darkandroid.info. That's right, darkandroid.info. It's not just a yearly podcast special anymore. Now it's a project. It's a page you can go to where we talk about, I keep it updated with the latest and greatest, the best apps that you can get, and the attitude, the mentality, the hardware, all the good stuff, to have that personal device for you that's concerned about dApps, really, decentralization, anonymity, privacy, and security. But speaking of security, so yeah, check out darkandroid.info. But speaking of security, I had the great honor today, just earlier today, to have a conversation via direct message with the one and only Steve Tiberius Gibson of the Security Now podcast, a personal hero of mine. If there's stallions out there in the tech world, he's one of them. He may be the original. Okay. Steve Gibson is the man. And we got to talk about, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit more in our main story, because we're going to be talking about Tesla, but we got to talk about cars, because this week on Security Now, he brought up, and this is part of the random access, we got quite a few things to get into here. He brought up how there was a Congress had effectively a meeting with Silicon Valley. It was a clusterfuck. You can actually go to Steve Gibson's YouTube channel. He now has a YouTube channel, and get the lowdown on that there. But he had a quote in Security Now this week where he said, it's demonstrably provable that cars today are less secure than cars of yesterday. And we talked about this because, if there's anything I say it all the time, the thing I get the most heat about, next to maybe Bitcoin, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but the thing I get the most heat about is I don't think there should be computers in cars. And he agreed with me. In fact, he said he felt that the reason for computers in cars was, for convenience for the convenience of the engineers. It makes it easier for them without having to come up with, clever, straight engineering, no computer needed tricks to get better gas mileage and meet environmental standards and things like that, that it's all a cheat. But it's a cheat that comes with a risk. It's convenience that trades off security, as convenience often does in our modern world. So I had mentioned to some followers on social media, I said, I'm having this conversation with Steve Gibson, and they said, Stallion, please give us the rundown. What did you guys talk about? How did it come out? And the basic, otherwise I might have wanted to ruminate on it a little bit, albeit I'm very excited, to talk to Steve Gibson. But basically it ended off with him saying to me, Brian, you're not nuts. Because that's what I always hear, is that I'm nuts for thinking there shouldn't be computers in cars. And yet you have one of the premier minds in the tech world and the security world. Take your pick. You have one of the premier minds, and he said, hey, no way. This is a bad idea putting that stuff in cars, especially today. And in fact, he made mention of a quote from someone this week. You know, the IoT is internet, not Internet of Things, but Internet of Targets. And I thought that was so spot on. So it was really, really, you know, I felt really good, and Sovereign Tech listeners should as well, to get some vindication on a lot of what we've been talking about here, that interconnecting all these things is a terrible idea. It's, you know, it's a clusterfuck waiting to happen, that computers in cars is at best laziness on the part of the engineers. At worst, who knows? I'm putting that part in. But felt good to hear from one of the best that I'm not crazy. So thank you all for being interested in wanting to hear about my conversation with him. That is the basic rundown of it. But let's get into the rest of the random access. Maybe not as interesting, or maybe very interesting. One thing, Google Plus, the thing that even I said is like, oh, all right, this is dead. This is breaking up. This is going away. This week, Google released what's called Google Plus Collections. And this has been getting touted around as Google for Pinterest for men. That's what it's being laid out as, this Google Plus Collection thing, is that it's Pinterest for men. And that's ridiculous, for one, but it does operate very similar to Pinterest. That's for sure. And what I really think this is this isn't like, because I think a lot of people, there's actually whole blogs. What is it, Google Plus Daily or something like that, where they cover all the interesting stuff that's happening with Google Plus, which is, you know, mind-boggling to me. And please let me be clear that as far as social media networks go, Google Plus feature-wise blows them all away. Feature-wise. Okay? That's all I'm saying is feature-wise. You know, the fact that it belongs to Google is harmful. The fact, you know, a whole bunch of other things, it's bad. But feature-wise, it smokes everybody. Okay? But anyway, Google Plus Collections, what I really think this is about changing targets. Google Plus was originally designed to take on Facebook. And considering that, you know, I think they've accepted that battle is kind of lost and maybe not even worth the time, because we've talked about in Sovereign Tech how I think that Facebook themselves are realizing that Facebook isn't going to last, that kind of social media is not going to last. And that's why they're concentrating on making Messenger a platform, and why Groups is a separate app now. And a lot of things are separate apps. But what I think is going on is Google Plus is changing targets, because now also, because I think they were taking out Facebook and they were hoping to best Twitter at their game. They're, you know, Google's working with Twitter again, with allowing for searches of tweets and things of that nature, right? So I think this is Google Plus now taking aim at Pinterest and hoping to best that, you know, because Pinterest is, for what it is, you know, at least in the conventional concept, it's a marketing boon. Like, it's an incredible opportunity to market. And so Google, I'm sure, is just looking to do that. So Google Plus is still largely going away. The Google Plus, anything remotely like it. I think this collections thing, what this is all about, is about, you know, changing targets of, you know, what type of social media they're going after. And in this case now, Google is going after Pinterest. And since the bulk of their, you know, what they make money on is ads, Pinterest is a hell of a target to go after. So it makes a lot of sense. But in reality, really, Google Plus is still, dead or dying, because, yeah, I mean, this isn't really what Google Plus was supposed to be. And I mean, who knows what Google Plus is supposed to be? I love that Sergey Brin even came out and said, it's like, look, I don't have a social life. I don't even know how to be social. Why did I create a social network? Great point. And as I said last week on the show, if you haven't listened to that episode, please do catch it. But as I said on last week on this show, I said that, you got to wonder, like, when you see programmers designing all this stuff that's supposed to change the way humans interact and whichever, if they don't interact with humans very well, you might want to put it under question just what exactly they would program. But moving on, this is something interesting. I made it a point to, and I think I succeeded, to not mention the Apple Watch at all last week because I'm really sick. I listen to a lot of tech news, read a lot of tech news, and I'm really sick of hearing about it. But one thing, there's a story that came out that I just couldn't avoid. I wanted to get this out there. Now, I don't have, a little personal here, I don't have any tattoos. Okay. I just, I don't necessarily have anything against tattoos. I don't have any. And, something almost made me want to get one. This week. And I found out that the Apple Watch, apparently the heart meter on the Apple Watch cannot detect your pulse if you have a wrist tattoo. And I was like, oh, well, this is fantastic. I mean, if only tattoos could put an end to the surveillance state, I'd be head to toe. So, hey, maybe tattoos, if you're interested in getting a tattoo, maybe, one as a self-defense measure is something to consider. So kudos to those with wrist tattoos and with tattoos in general. That's cool. So I thought that was amazing. Anyway, speaking of Facebook, we talked about Facebook there for a minute. Facebook and IBM, and this is definitely me going on a bit of a prediction here. But this week they announced that they will be teaming up for marketing. Speaking of marketing again, that's what everybody seems to be going for. And now first off, why is everybody going after marketing? What's the big concern about getting ad sales out there, or, not ad sales, but like getting advertisements out there and making them relevant? And honestly, what I think it really is about is that no one's actually really making money. There's a story being told. There's a narrative getting sold to companies. There's a narrative getting sold B2B, business to business, right? That somehow online marketing works. But I don't think it does. Not really. Maybe email marketing might work on some people. I don't even want to get into that. Okay. But that online marketing, like what Google's doing, things like that all the numbers are pretty much fudged. There's a great book. I've talked about it many times. There's a book called Social Media is Bullshit. It's a couple of years old now. Okay. But I still think it's relevant. And it talks about how, none of these numbers are really real. The algorithms are terrible at guessing at what's reality. And so I think that looking for these new ways to market out there is to, at some point, the piper has to get paid by these companies. Google, Facebook, you take your pick. And at some point, they really have to be able to show real serious data, or in a couple of years, maybe less, the whole sham, the wizard's going to, the man behind the curtain is going to get revealed that he's not a wizard. So I think that's why there's such a big push for this, is because they've got to make it look good. Now, my evidence is scant, I'm guessing, but then I also think their evidence is incredibly scant, and it's them telling you cannot personally verify the information that they send you because it's their algorithms, and you can't look at that. Some of them you can, some of them they've open sourced, right? So anyway, I don't believe it. I think that there's something fishy going on there, something screwy going on there. I think the Bitcoin space is honestly seeing the price of that, of people, of all these startups I've talked about this a million times, thinking that somehow, I'll just market online. Like somehow that's going to allow you to actually grow, when it doesn't. There are traditional ways of marketing that have actually largely worked over the past century and less. But they don't want to do it. And now, I saw a very good friend of mine showed me some interesting statistics that the amount of companies starting to accept Bitcoin has dropped precipitously in 2015, like compared to the adoption that it had before. And maybe that's because, again, it's just another bubble, a very quick bubble, bubble of bullshit. As far as people thinking that there's some kind of hype, but there's nothing really there. And largely that's because all of these marketing metrics that people see they don't reflect reality. They reflect what the algorithm tells it, what gets fudged and massaged. It's not reality. So anyway, all of that said, IBM and Facebook working together, I actually consider a scary thing. Because, yes, I think they could be interested in marketing together, but I get worried when we've talked about how, and I've made my case, how I think Facebook is wanting to become your ID system. It wants to replace your driver's license, your whatever, maybe hell, even your birth certificate, who knows? Okay. But it wants to become the required ID system. It wants to become your punch card at work. It wants to become all these things. And then if you plug that in to IBM, what IBM's doing, and like Watson, and my concern is this, is what IBM did 60 years ago, 70 years ago with Deamag in Germany, Nazi Germany. I said this before about IBM and with Deamag. How exactly was, Hitler able to round up the Jews in Germany? It's because they all signed up for a nice little national ID system called Deamag, and it all got listed, and everything was punch carded and, quantonic piss corrected, whatever. I mean, just ridiculous, system that they had set up, which was called Deamag at the time. And that's how he did it. And that, honestly, if you, by your Facebook history, become a very unpopular person or out of fashion in modern society, well, fortunately, we know how to get in touch with you, courtesy of IBM and Facebook. So I worry about that. And it's even more worrisome. I've heard some recent interviews from people that I would think should know better. But they are pushing for centralized ID systems. And I've made this case on other networks, not just on Sovryn Tech. Fortunately, I've been able to talk in other venues, other areas where I said, you do not want a centralized ID system that people can have access to, because that's just, you're and it's like, well, but you got to hold the criminals accountable. But here's where that argument falls apart, in my opinion, is that, okay, say you don't have, a central ID system. Yes, there are people that are going to take advantage, or, this isn't a certainty, but there is the chance that there are going to be people, perhaps even a lot of people, that would take advantage of innocent people, okay, and cause some form of harm. And I don't know what percentage of society would be like that. Or what if, society was actually, not designed, but if it allowed for freedom of choice, maybe there wouldn't be as many criminals. Regardless, that's an academic argument. What's not academic is that if you have centralized systems of any shape or size, like even a central ID system, then that allows, forget about the fact that there could be 1 billion criminals. That allows one criminal power over everybody. No ID system, yes, you'll have a few criminals, and they can affect a very small part of the population. You have a central ID system, you've got one criminal that can affect every single human being on the planet. No thanks. Tell you what, like an old hero of mine used to say, you take those central ID systems, you shine them up real nice, you turn them sideways, and you stick them straight up. You know what I was going to say. Moving on. Speaking of centralized systems, Ripple. Woo! We've been talking about Ripple for quite some time. And for the past few weeks, really, it's the gift that just keeps on giving. And apparently FinCEN has been looking into Ripple and fining them $700,000. For failure to work within regulations, etc. So now this is interesting because a few people have said that those are membership dues, which I'm open to that, saying that FinCEN or that Ripple has become part of the system, which is exactly what I had said, is that this is Ripple becoming part of the system. I've said that over the past few weeks. And also, there's the theory that it's going to, pretty much eliminate innovation in the United States, and that a lot of these blockchain companies, blockchain technology companies or whatever, are going to go overseas because if FinCEN's going to mess with Ripple, they're going to mess with everybody. Well, they're going to mess with everybody no matter what. I mean, that's a fact. So, as far as what do I think is going on, Yeah, I could see that's kind of membership dues that, you get your little hazing. Okay, we make you look good or we make you look bad by having you pay $700,000. But then once you pay it and you come out of it, then suddenly, Ripple, you're the government golden boy. You get to play ball with everybody. See, don't worry, folks. Don't worry, citizens, even though citizens don't exist. Don't worry, citizens. Ripple is they're with the good guys now, and they've paid their dues. If you have XRP, I'm not giving you investment advice. I'm giving you life-saving advice. Get rid of that shit. Now. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I'm very open to, to that, just them going into the system. All right, one last bit, and then I want to talk about what's going on at Tesla. Firefox. I'm a little worried about this. I'm a little perturbed because Firefox this week announced, and it was a very heated debate, but they announced that there will be privileged access to features from this point on in Firefox's development to those that use HTTPS, that use SSL. And if you don't use SSL, there's going to be features in Firefox that that website cannot access or cannot be a part of. Now, this is strong-arming, which we've constantly complained about that Google does with Chrome, but now here's Firefox doing it. And it's interesting, Cory Doctorow, he recently did a write-up that I never got around to reading. Actually, it wasn't recent. This might have been a year ago, where he was very concerned about Firefox playing ball with Adobe, playing ball with closed source systems, because Firefox is so well known for being open source, very open. And I recommend Firefox to people. But this shows what happens when something operates under a standards body like the WC3, which is what Firefox operates under. Firefox takes its marching orders from WC3. Now, certainly, it's still better than Chrome, okay? It's still the better choice of browser. But it's the fact that they're strong-arming, just like Google does, is very concerning to me. That they are I'm not saying SSL is a bad idea. I think it's a fine idea to do it. But to force people to do it at the loss of features, that really comes off as we know better than you. I don't know. It's something about it, the action, like the fact that they want people using SSL itself is fine. The way that they can do it, and it so highlights how at the client side, it doesn't matter what laws happen, in Washington, D.C., how they want to regulate the internet or do whatever else. Because if, just seemingly a company can say, okay, well, if it doesn't support this, we don't support it anymore. Like even Firefox does. What else can they do? In principle, what else can they do is my point. In principle, this is a bad idea. Security-wise, it's a great idea to have SSL. It's a great idea to create features that count on a certain level of security for the internet. And good levels of security at that, by comparison. Okay? But at the same time, the principle itself is a bad one. It really is. So a little concerned about Firefox, and as far as the solution goes, yes, there's tons. If people want me to talk about it, send me an email and I'll cover like the alternative web browsers that are good to use. Okay. I still recommend Firefox right now, but if you're looking to get a jump on this or something, well, that we can look into other open source options. Like there's Pale Moon that's actually based off of Firefox code. That's a really great. In fact, they already have a 64-bit version of it, so you can essentially use 64-bit Firefox on Windows or whatever machine with Pale Moon. That's ahead of the game than even Mozilla. But I can list off web browsers, but as it stands, I'm still recommending Firefox all the way. So anyway, let's get into our main story this week, because this was something that, boy, everybody was talking about quite a bit. And this is Tesla. Elon Musk, at the end of April, they were promoting this. Oh, we're going to have a big announcement and all that. And pretty much everybody knew he wasn't going to be unveiling a car. And you didn't need to have insider information for that. You could just see how terribly Tesla cars are really selling. Again, when you look at the straight data, you can tell that they're doing really, really bad. In fact, he has that Tesla buyback program, which is pretty much like what Obama did with Cash for Clunkers, where he is effectively, everybody realized economically, he stole from the future of car sales. And that's largely what Tesla did when they created this buyback program, in my opinion. And so, Tesla branching out into doing other things and using what they've learned from their cars to do other things is not a shock. And I don't think it shocked everybody. Most people knew that it was going to be a battery. But let's read about this battery. This is from TechCrunch. Tesla's $3,000 Powerwall will let households run entirely on solar energy. You almost certainly associate Tesla with cars, very cool cars. But the company, even though Golden Stallion here and Steve Gibson, would tell you, no, not cool cars. But the company has an even grander vision beyond that. Today, CEO and founder Elon Musk unveiled Tesla Energy, a new business arm that is focused on ending our dependence on grid power and switching instead to solar energy. The first Tesla Energy product is Powerwall Home Battery, a stationary battery that can power a household without requiring the grid. The battery is rechargeable lithium-ion. It uses Tesla's existing battery tech and can be fixed to a wall, removing much of the existing complexity around using a local power source. Quote, "The issue with existing batteries is that they suck," end quote, Musk said in a press conference announcing Tesla Energy. "They are expensive, unreliable, and bad in every way." Tesla's solution, he said, is different. For one thing, the company's batteries cost $3,500 for 10 kilowatt hours and $3,000 for 7 kilowatt hours, and your snarky Apple Watch price comparison here. Fair enough point. Because an Apple Watch costs, the gold one, the Apple edition or whatever, it costs $17,000 maxed out, and yet you could get a battery that, could do 10 kilowatt hours. For $3,500. They are open for pre-orders in the U.S. now. The first orders will be dispatched in late summer. Like regular batteries, they can be used together. Up to 9 can be stacked up together to create a strong and reliable power source. Musk said he believes they can help people in emerging markets or remote locations leapfrog the need for existing power systems in a similar way that mobile phones have become more important than landlines in remote parts of the world. The Tesla Powerwall charges using solar power, but it also integrates with the grid, quote, to harness excess power and give customers the flexibility to draw energy from their own reserve, end quote. The batteries recharge in a smart way, saving money by picking low-rate periods when electricity is cheapest. They store solar energy for later, for example, overnight, and can act as a backup in the event of a power outage. Removing dirty energy is an ambitious plan, much like space travel, but Musk believes it can be done. He explained that 160 million battery packs could transition power usage in the U.S. to renewable energy, while 900 million units could shift the entire world's energy needs. Then there is the potential to make the world's cars run on clean energy. This is within the power of humanity to do, Musk said. It is not impossible. It is something that we can do, but there's going to need to be other companies involved, end quote. Musk added that Tesla will continue its policy of open sourcing patents to help make that happen. Let me break in right there, because I always want to make sure that this gets laid out. Elon Musk is not some kind of philosophically sound and inclined human being because he open sources his patents. He open sources his patents so he can get other companies to come in with infrastructure so he doesn't have to do it all on his own. It's a business decision. It is not, it's not a moral or an ethical decision. Libertarians praised him up and fucking down for, open sourcing patents to do with Tesla's cars, and it was bullshit. It had nothing to do, or it was the power stations, not the cars, that they did it. Okay, it had nothing at all to do with somehow, I believe in freedom. I want to cut in a little bit more. This is interesting. I like the idea of decentralizing the grid, which this can kind of allow for. And I imagine 2-3 generations down the line, maybe it can be a whole hell of a lot better. Okay, because that isn't exactly, 10 kilowatt hours, even if you stack 9 of them, that's at best, we'll say 100 kilowatt hours. I think like the average household, it's not going to do it. Okay. Like it's not enough yet, but I love the idea. I love the idea of, I dig solar energy. I've talked about this on Sovereign Tech. I've had guests on, I've had specialists in the field on to talk about it. I love this thing or this idea. Okay. But I want to be clear on something with Tesla, with Elon Musk. It's a company that shouldn't exist. It's a government welfare queen. Tesla should have died years ago. It should have gone bankrupt. It shouldn't be here. It got saved by government largesse. Now, some people could say, well, if it wasn't for government, it would have existed in the first place. Well, if you want to go down that line of thinking, then we would have had electric cars 100 years ago, probably. Who the hell knows what cars would be running on now if there wasn't government? Okay, that doesn't give Elon Musk a pass for sucking off the government teat. There's no hero here. This guy loves his government. Despite sometimes he says some pretty libertarian things like he talks about drugs and whatever else. Please, do you think, Richard Branson started talking about the drug war now too. Now, what took Branson so long? Why wasn't he talking about the drug war in the 90s? He wasn't. They're looking at it now because now they see it as the next chance for an economic boomtown. That's why they give a shit about marijuana. It's not some kind of like, oh yeah, it's just a plant. It's not some ethical argument on their part. It's a money-making fucking deal. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying don't praise them as heroes. Don't call them libertarian. Don't say they're liberty-minded when everything they're doing has zero to do with anything ethical, philosophical, or moral. Because it's not. Now, all that said, yes, let's do this. Let's get off of the grid. Let's figure out. I'm shocked that there isn't better technology, but this is definitely, a leap forward in that regard. I'm with it, man. I think it's great. Okay. I love this sort of thing. There's been other companies over the years. There's ones that were kind of doing a similar idea with a Powerwall where it was actually a cube. In those cubes, you could lay out like bricks and they would actually literally be a wall of power. Okay, I was interested in that idea. I don't buy that somehow Elon Musk wants to fuck with National Grid. I really have a hard time accepting that being a reality. But maybe, maybe this is something, maybe in the end, all this is really about is about creating an efficient power system for his cars. That could swing both ways. I'm open to either interpretation, that either they're getting into another business because they know their car business sucks, or they are creating the technology that will allow their cars to somehow thrive. But selling it off as somehow it being liberating, when in the end, it'll probably never deliver enough power to be truly liberating what we're talking about. And he's, in some of his comments, some of Elon Musk's comments, I mean, he's wrong. Okay? Yeah, okay, some of these batteries suck. Some suck. But others have been around for 100 years, and it's amazing what some batteries can do. Okay, you consider your car battery. The battery that's in the average car right now was originally designed, all it would handle is maybe six different little systems, 6 different things that it had to power. Now it powers 200 to 300. And it still does a pretty damn good job. Some of these batteries last decades. Okay, so no, battery technology doesn't really suck. Also, he insulted motor vehicles, saying that, boy, somebody thinking that, the rear-wheeled engine car or, engine-propelled car was just the dumbest way to do things. Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. That wasn't the dumbest way to do things. I mean, this is stuff he says to get headlines, just to get some press and to act like like he's big stuff. When he's not the guy, I love it. Everybody's like, oh, he's the real life Tony Stark. He didn't design the Tesla battery. He's not, down in his basement listening to Suicidal Tendencies like Tony Stark in Iron Man 1, or was that 2? And, and he's there like designing things with Jarvis. No, he just finds people and he pays them to figure this shit out. Huge teams of people put this together. It's ridiculous alone that he gets any kind of credit for that shit. It's important to have heroes, but it's important to know who really are. And I don't think Elon Musk is one of them. And honestly, as excited I am as the principal, and maybe people will open source use this technology, this open source patents for how these batteries work, and will create, those people will create something that can really set power, homes free from being attached to a centralized power grid, and all of that. Great. Awesome. If that's the side product that happens out of this, fantastic. Okay. But let's get excited about that. And let's be a little wary about what Elon Musk is doing. Because, Tony Stark, actually, in the comic books right now, he's the villain. Hey, I only got a few seconds. Please go to zog.ninja, zod.ninja. Grab your copy. Use the code SVT. You can get $1 off. Grab your copy of Hyperchronius. And check out darkandroid.info. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. If you'll excuse me. You're not Natalia. Who are you?
Oh, hello, Mr. Sovryn. Natalia is on another mission. I'm Elizabeth. I'm here to debrief you.
I'd love for you to debrief me, but how did you get in my room?
The bellboy let me in.
Well, hooray for the bellboy.
Tech Roulette.
It is time for Tech Roulette, where I cover the stories that get sent to me through the various channels available. Of course, the best way to do it is to go to sovereigntech.ninja or zog.ninja. It all kind of leads to the same hub of information, and there's a Contact Us tab. Just hit that, and you'll find all the ways to get in touch with me there. But of course, Twitter, lots of ways to get in touch with me and the show. So before anybody gives me any shit, okay, look. The combustion automobile, yes, there's better technologies, and I'm open to that some of those better technologies have been held back. I remember the documentary Who Killed the Electric Car, based off of the book that came out in the 90s. I remember that, okay? In fact, hell, I remember Mother Earth News, they had an Opel in the 70s that could be completely electric. I understand. I'm not saying that the combustion engine, okay, that automobile is the greatest idea ever. I'm just saying it's ridiculous to insult it. Okay. It was a brilliant move of engineering, in every sense of the term. And so I just find it insulting that Elon Musk would insult, the automobile as it were. I think there's a lot of respect due. I get annoyed. That's something else. Libertarians like to do that too, where, Lou Rockwell was ripping on the space shuttle, saying, if there was the free market, we could have such a better vehicle. No, space shuttle was brilliance, was fucking brilliance. Spend 2 seconds, as I have, in any engineering department, and you're going to find out just how brilliant some of that shit is. Okay, yeah, we talked earlier about how engineers can certainly get lazy, especially when computers come into play, but we're talking about times before there was any, computer of any sort like we're discussing here. I mean, remember the original shuttle, the Enterprise, the test shuttle, that had all analog equipment pretty much. So anyway, I wanted to get that clear. The other thing I want to mention, if no one else, if new listeners haven't noticed this, I know I've got new listeners. There's a storyline that runs between the segments. If you've been listening to the past couple episodes, now that storyline I change it up every 25 episodes. Okay. But that's the thing, every 25 episodes. So you can go back and between episodes 75 and 100 is the original story. And then there's this story. There was a couple of episodes where I did a little bit of a different one, but then there's been this story up until episode 125. And then the next week we change it. Okay. And it's just something entertaining I like to do. It's like those guys like Spy versus Spy on the side of Mad Magazine. You know what I mean? It's just my way to kind of put a story within a podcast that's, very serious, albeit I like to have fun at the same time. Okay. So if you didn't understand what that was all about, there is, an overarching story and all of that. Anyway, talking about stories, got a doozy because there was, maybe this should belong in Hacksec, but I think we might skip Hacksec this week because I got a couple of very, very interesting topics I want to get into and I want to make sure I have time for them. And this is from Time Magazine. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and read it. I won't give it any prologue here. Without Edward Snowden, our system could have failed. Now, I'll stop right there for a second and say, you read that headline and you say to yourself, wait a minute, Time Magazine is recognizing Edward Snowden as a hero and not a traitor? What happened? Well, let's read on. Snowden's actions may have resulted in positive change that proves our tripartite system works. Quote, every time you pick up a phone, dial a number, write an email, travel on a bus, carrying a cell phone, swipe a card somewhere, you leave a trace. And the government has decided that it's a good idea to collect it all. Everything. Even if you've never been suspected of a crime. It was the creeping realization that no one else was going to do this. The public had a right to know about these programs. The public had a right to know that which the government is doing in its name. Edward Snowden, German TV interview, January 2014. And going on with the story. The tripartite nature of American government is on display. Congress is contemplating extending the Patriot Act, allowing it to expire, or performing it by June 1st. A federal court yesterday concluded that the controversial S.215 of the Patriot Act, allowing secret metadata gathering of phone records by the government, was illegal. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals did not specifically rule that the Patriot Act was unconstitutional, though critics of the act will certainly see the suggestion in this opinion. In a 97-page unanimous opinion in a case entitled ACLU versus Clapper et al., the prestigious Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York City reversed an earlier trial court ruling and held that S215's bulk telephone data program is subject to judicial review. In the core of this opinion, Judge Gerard Lynch wrote that, quote, the program exceeds the scope of what Congress has authorized, end quote. The opinion discussed the history of the earlier Church Committee hearings about historic abusive surveillance practices of intelligence agencies and the evolution of the FISA Act, 1978, allowing secret ex parte proceedings, and the Patriot Act now under review in Congress. The court decision dealt with the metadata practices of Verizon performed at the government's order and revealed by The Guardian with information leaked by Edward Snowden. The order applies to other service providers as well, by implication. The government argued that any complaint about its practices had to be made to the FISA court. The Second Circuit concluded that its judicial review was appropriate. And I would note that this court was far more quote-unquote judicial than the ex parte secret hearings conducted by FISA quote-unquote courts. The Circuit Court ruled that the government's position that its standard for collecting metadata conforms with prevailing search and seizure law was wrong. Quote, unprecedented and unwarranted, end quote, were the words used. The court found that, quote, sheer volume of information sought is staggering, end quote, and that the amount and nature of the data collected was qualitatively too broad and vague, neither within proper bounds nor limited to data required for fighting the war on terror. The government's procedures, the court ruled, are, quote, inconsistent with the very concept of an investigation, end quote, lacking specificity, relevance, and time limitations. The court concluded that, quote, to allow the government to collect phone records only because they may be relevant to a possible authorized investigation in the future is, quote, impermissible, irreconcilable with the statute, end quote. Congress can't be deemed to have approved a program of which many members were unaware and which was, quote, shrouded in secrecy, end quote. The court added, agreeing with critics, that congressional oversight of national security surveillance procedures since 9/11 has been lacking. In an observation critical, In an observation critical of the process of congressional oversight in national security matters, the court remarked that suggesting legislative approval of the questionable practices, quote, would ignore reality, end quote. That's funny. Suddenly they're trying to appeal to reality when, in reality, the government doesn't exist. It's a mental fiction, a spook of the mind. But hey, going on, its conclusion, S215, quote, does not authorize the telephone metadata program, end quote. It refused to deal with claims that S215 violated the First and Fourth Amendments, noting that Congress is considering the future of the Patriot Act and may act on these questions imminently. The court deemed it prudent to allow for that debate in Congress, which may, quote, profoundly alter the legal landscape, end quote. Edward Snowden must be smiling today as he remains in his prolonged exile in Russia. All the reforms of the excess of data surveillance he revealed indicate that his disclosures have had the impact that motivated him. Top UN officials have questioned the practices of member states which violate core privacy rights. Reformative laws are pending in Congress. A White House panel has called for 46 reforms of prevailing practices. Congressional oversight of national security procedures has been questioned by prestigious experts in the field. None of this would have happened if Snowden had not committed his audacious act of civil disobedience. His influence has been historic. His answer on German TV to those who argue that Snowden is a traitor, quote, "If I am a traitor, who did I betray? I gave all my information to the American public," end quote, and to the world as it turned out. Our country sometimes acts precipitously in times of great provocation, as it did with Japanese Americans after Pearl Harbor, for example. But in time, we make amends for these excesses. The colony's making amends. I don't know who the hell this we fucking is. This guy wasn't alive during the Japanese-American, internment. We make amends. How do you make amends for mass racism? There's no such thing as institutionalized racism. Ask the Japanese. Reading on. Some of our actions after 9/11, extreme rendition, for example, an excessive surveillance technique now under consideration in Congress and the federal courts, may result in reform of illegal procedures Mr. Snowden exposed. Good signs that our tripartite system works. Tripartite is, three. I think that's really just making reference to, the fact that, checks and balances and all of that. So, effectively, this guy is saying thank you to, Time Magazine is effectively saying thank you to Edward Snowden for bringing all of this to light, because if he didn't bring it all to light, then when all this news finally popped, it would have been too late. The NSA would have been so overboard that the American people, the colonists, I like to call America the colonies, would have revolted or something. Now, Snowden himself said that this ruling was significant. He said it wasn't enough, but he said it was significant. So essentially, I can get this real clear. This guy at Time Magazine is happy that, thankfully, since Snowden, did his audacious act, wouldn't even call it heroic, really. But since he did his audacious act, thankfully the Republic will still be here. God damn it. Snowden, you should have kept your mouth shut. Because if in a few more years the Republic would have went down, then we'd be talking about people being free again and getting access to their liberties as humans. Shit. Shouldn't have said anything, Edward. It's tough. It's really tough. First off, this doesn't change anything. This doesn't do anything. This ruling is absolute bullshit. I think it's bullshit that Snowden said it was significant. But I guess he feels like he needs to, keep the troop, the troops rallied or whatever. Keep the pep talk going. Yeah, we're making progress. We're making progress. When all this progress is within the system where the system created the problem in the first place. The system can't fix its own problem that is a byproduct of its very existence. That's impossible. You can't cure cancer with cancer. I don't like to argue from analogy, but that's the point. It's the oldest saying in the book. It's not even an analogy. You can't fight fire with fire. I mean, that's literally the Egyptians said that. They knew that. It just got passed down. So I don't know, sometimes I wonder I get to the point where I say to myself, and I see all the shit that's going on, you talk about with Ripple, all the stuff that's happening in the blockchain world, what's going on with Bitcoin, and, you know, all this stuff. You go down the list and how really, you know, the system, the legacy system, be that economic, governmental, or whatever, ecclesiastical, you take your pick, you know, how it all just worms its way into these, into these exciting times or into these exciting developments that could be happening. Like the crypto economy that is genuinely coming out of what happened with Edward Snowden is a really great thing, but that has nothing to do with government. In fact, if government had its way, there was already another hearing, I believe, with Congress this week, where they told Silicon Valley, you smartasses figure out how to put backdoors in your encryption. We won't let you have perfect encryption. So don't think that this matters one bit. It's nonsense that somehow this shows the system works. No, it shows the system for what it really is, a lying, gaggle of dolts. But sometimes I get to the point where I just say to myself, you know what? You know, fuck it. Let it all get centralized. Let it all get interconnected. Let the Internet of Targets or the Internet of Things to be hacked. I'm sorry, the Internet of Things. I got that wrong. Actually, I think I got it more right. Let it all happen. Let it all come together and let everybody just feed off of this, massive, a mass scale of information getting collected. Let the whole system just get so centralized. Let it all come together. And that way the people that know it for what it is and have taken the time to educate themselves on what it is and how to work outside of it can do so. Maybe that's the answer. Let the whole thing, pretty much, fall on its own ass. Let it all get interconnected. Let it all, do this and that. And then when it's all, and everybody becomes reliant upon that interconnectivity, the people that aren't reliant upon it, the people that can act without it, the people that have the tools that act without it can do so. And move on. And maybe get some real freedom in their life. Nothing got solved in Congress or in court this week. Nothing will get solved there. And honestly, if you try to, somebody will say, well, God, if we just had some libertarian judges, if we just had some anarchist politicians. Hey, anarchist politicians? What? The fuck does that even mean? If we had some of those in there, well, they could have at least brought light to what's going on. At what cost? What does it cost to do anything in government? What's the price? How much is the plane ticket? How much is the campaign to even get somebody to be able to talk to these people in the halls of power? 10,000, 100,000, 500,000, a million, 10 million? Could you imagine what kind of things, what kind of hardware and software development we could do with $10 million with some really, really gung-ho people with a soldering iron in their garage that are just dying to be left alone? Do you imagine what we could do if we funded those people? Holy shit, you want to talk about the market coming up of stuff. Forget Silicon Valley. Forget Washington, D.C. Forget it all. You want to put some money somewhere? Put it where something can actually get done. The entire PC revolution happened in garages. And I think the real answer is to go to those garages, not unlike some guys at Intel did when they heard about the Apple II getting developed way, way back with Steve Jobs and Wozniak. You visit the garage and you cut them the check. Enough of this incubator and enough of that shit. Enough trying to get something to happen in Congress. Enough spending money there. Really, I say this often, but really, you think about like what Ron Paul spent on educating people about what's going on in the surveillance state and all this blah, 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 and hunky-dory bullshit. Okay, you think about all that. The amount of money spent, he could have bought his own city. In America, in the colonies, he could have bought his own city. Don't you think that would have been a much better way of spending money? Well, it's in the middle of fucking nowhere. And what? This anarchy thing isn't for the thinnest skin. Priorities are so screwed up. I can only imagine. I know some guys that if you gave them 10 million bucks, they'd make Elon Musk look like somebody from the 16th century as far as what they could develop if they had the time and they weren't, they didn't have to spend so much time being a family man or whatever else and just being able to feed themselves because of this disgusting economy we live in. Political action, waste of time, funding a lot of these startups that say, well, we'll do it all behind closed doors, and we'll just make it look good out front at first, and then we'll really get them when we get up there. That doesn't happen either. That's the same argument that these quote unquote anarchist politicians make. It's crap. When they get in there, they enjoy it. They get a taste of that milk, baby. Woo! And they can't get enough. Stop it. What Edward Snowden did definitely changed the world. That's a fact. Don't confuse me on that. But the way it's changing the world isn't happening in Washington, D.C. It ain't happening in Silicon Valley. It ain't happening anywhere that you could probably name. But it's happening. I'll be back with more. This is Sovereign Tech.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
During the 1920s, small sexually oriented 8-page booklets called Tijuana Bibles suddenly started appearing. These crude little booklets were printed on cheap paper. They were usually irreverent and humorous. They often poked fun at actors, politicians, and public figures, and they were always dirty, featuring sex-starved characters from Popeye and Donald Duck to baseball heroes, all with their pants down and their penises proud. How these pornographic parodies got the name Tijuana Bibles is anyone's guess, but they had no problem finding their way into the backpacks of soldiers and schoolboys. Tijuana Bibles remained popular until after World War II, when glossy magazines with pin-ups of large-breasted women wearing bathing suits started to appear. Now the magazines packed a much better bang for the buck, and then it was only a few years later when Playboy magazine arrived, putting the last nails in the coffin of the Tijuana Bibles. Now, some of you might be wondering what relevance this erotica from 80 years ago has today when we've got free porn on the internet 24/7. Well, I think sex in history is a pretty cool thing to be aware of, so I've posted images of Tijuana Bibles on our website at 90secondsonsex.com so you can see what your great-great-grandfather was probably masturbating to.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
I just received an encrypted message from Decentral with your next mission, and it looks like I'm coming along.
Why, Elizabeth, I wouldn't have it any other way. You're clearly good at staying on top of things.
It helps when one's partner is very skilled.
No, we can have more fun later. What does the message say?
Important messages.
It is time for Important Messages, where I cover the emails, messages that get sent in through the various channels available to Sovereign Tech listeners. And of course, if you just want to go to sovereigntech.ninja, that's Sovryn, there's a Contact Us tab, hit that, and there's plenty of ways to get in touch with me. There's BitMessage, there's a form right there where you don't even have to give me your email address unless you want me to respond. You don't have to do anything, and you don't even have to have the email address, and you can just send me a message and I will get it. Also, there's Telegram. There's a bunch of different ways to get in touch with me. So anyway, I got quite a few emails that I want to get through and a lot of listener thoughts that I think are important to share based on recent episodes. But first I want to say that Hyperchronius, thank you so much to all those that have bought it so far. There has been, I've actually re-uploaded it at least once now, just to fix bug fixes and all, or not necessarily bug fixes, but we'll call them that. I guess you could just never get it absolutely perfect no matter how hard you try. So anyway, because that's what I was trying so hard. But anyway, But the reviews are still coming in, people, and I will be sharing those with you in the future more so. Again, like I said earlier in the show, I was on the Edgington Post with Mark Edge, and we talked about it, had a great time discussing it. And I think this is something that's really important. I'm really honored to be doing this for, well, I mean, you know, I wanted to make a video game. That's why I did it. But I'm very honored to say that the Liberty Movement or whatever, now certainly has video games in its repertoire as far as, what it's producing. So anyway, darkandroid.info. I mentioned that earlier. Please do check that out. It is something that is going to be updated more. And it's actually a two-prong site. It's all part of the main, Zomi Offline Games website. Okay, just like Sovryn Tech is now as well. But there's a blog that will keep you up to date with the updates, and I'll also share news on the Dark Android blog. Okay, but then there's darkandroid.info, the main site, which lays out kind of in Wikipedia style, what software to use, what hardware to use, and it talks about attitude, the attitude you have to have. And at the bottom of it, there's some other sites that you get to check out as well, as like Alternative 2, prismbreak.org, and there's Fosdroid, which is another good one to look at. Plenty of stuff to check out. And I will keep updating it because I didn't cover all of the software that I've covered in past Dark Android podcasts. And I want to get that all transliterated or transmitted or whatever onto that main site. And then I'll keep updating the blog with news. And if you follow it, again, you can follow with Pushbullet if you want. Okay. And you'll get the latest updates as far as, anything that's going on with the Dark Android blog. Because if there's important news that I think is relative to what we have going on with Dark Android, I want to talk about that. And of course, there's the main blog, the Zog blog. There's so much to do, and there's more coming, a lot more coming. Now that Hyperchronius is pretty much done, I've got so many things I get to concentrate now on. And so zog.ninja or sovereigntech.ninja or darkandroid.info kind of all heads to the same place, just different sections, is going to be quite the place to hopefully have a lot of fun and maybe get some freedom. So anyway, let's get into our questions for this week. I've got one. I'm not going to get to it this week, but I got one from just a guy I really appreciate his emails. I've read some of them in the past, and he shared something really heartfelt about I shared some thoughts about expatriation in the past, and so I will be getting to that email. I won't be getting to it this week, but I definitely will touch on that. So let's get into. A lot of people responded to last week's episode of Sovryn Tech where I was talking about Google's plan to essentially replace loved ones, or not replace, but create robots that can mimic your deceased loved ones. And then I also talked about the porn industry in the second segment of that show. So this has to do with the porn industry part. And let's see here. Hi, Brian. And of course, I keep you anonymous unless you want me to mention your name. Hi, Brian. I agree with some of the things you said, and he's talking about what I said about the porn industry, but I think you overlooked a lot in regards to the porn industry. The internet revolutionized the porn industry in a way that it is more decentralized, and that the new distribution of porn actually creates more choices. Here is an example of choices. Go to clipforsale.com and just scroll through the categories. But the concept of custom porn clips really caused the industry to lose its Hollywood status. Now, quote unquote Hollywood status. Now consumers can search for porn stars that they wish to masturbate to, negotiate with them and their producers on the video they want to see at a personalized rate if the porn star is interested and will participate. The porn industry is now a member of the decentralized distributed system and is no longer a part of any centralized distributed system. Pornographers are now forced, through nonviolence, to either be entrepreneurs or waste their time with the state like other small and big business owners, especially in regards to copyright. If they waste time with the government, then that is time lost on producing a custom porn clip. Big thanks to you and Stephanie, of course, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, for being awesome as always. You know what? Great email. Just straight up great email. And that's something it was a point I actually kind of wanted to get into, but I ran out of time. And that is that now, my point is that porn stars, porn producers, porn companies, they have to innovate. And in some ways they have, but it's not really like on a company level. And so I think what I didn't consider is the way that this emailer laid this out, saying now it's a decentralized distributed system, or it's part of that. I agree with you. I really agree with you because, if you follow them on Instagram or on Twitter, if you follow these porn actresses or actors or whatever, they give you like an email address where you can email them and ask what you would like to see, or they will send custom photos or custom videos like the emailer described and whichever else. Now that's innovation, but that's kind of the thing. And that's what I was saying they need to do to keep making the money. And if this is working for them, that's great. I'm really glad, it's great if they've cracked the code on how to, really make that work. Okay. But that was kind of the thing I didn't get into, is that now a porn actress can't just show up. And I think in an economic sense or in an entrepreneurial sense, they deserve some respect for this, for what the emailer laid out, because now they can't just show up and get fucked. They have to run their Instagram account. They have to run their Twitter account. They have to run, whatever account. They have to manage a couple email addresses. They have to manage this. They're their own marketers and their own promoters largely now. And I mean, maybe there's still agents that kind of help out with that sort of thing. Sure. But I'm pretty sure in a lot of ways that sometimes it's really, it's really the women, the porn actresses or the porn actors, the men too, that have to, do a lot of that grunt work, or at least have to figure out ways to hire the people that will do that grunt work for them. Okay. So yeah, I agree. You're absolutely right, emailer, that is what's going on. And so the situation is only dire if they expect, to be able to, just work an hour a day, which I can tell you as, having, I've hung around porn stars. Okay. That used to be how it was. Is that, they'd work an hour, 2 hours at most. Maybe they have to get up early. And, and then they could play the rest of the day, and they do that, once a week, if not less. So, just that time is certainly gone, and people complaining about that time being gone. The level of innovation they have to do, it would appear, and I agree with the emailer that it's happening. It's kind of here, but I still think that a lot of what we're seeing, like I mentioned, bang bus and all that stuff, that is still an absolute lack of creativity, that is a byproduct of, not necessarily of, that's not innovation. That's them not being able to afford or, doing it perhaps the right way or whichever else. I still think that holds true. Maybe there's room for all of this, but yes, I think it's a great point to make that a lot of porn stars, the porn industry has very much become distributed and decentralized. That's a very fair point. So let's get on to, there was a couple comments about Google robots. Some people said that I missed an opportunity to talk about a couple of TV shows that really discussed it. And that was Black Mirror, which is a great show. I've recommended that before. I definitely, absolutely at this emailer's insistence, I recommend it again. Okay. So check that out to get some ideas of how bad that could happen, or what bad things could potentially happen. That's always nice to have science fiction around as the pulse of the future, and just something to look out for. So that was interesting. But, speaking of some other science fiction, actually some anime, got one message here on SoundCloud, on the actual sound. Haven't seen Her, referring to the movie Her with, is that Joaquin Phoenix in that, where he falls in love with the operating system on his phone. But this reminded me of the Persocoms in the manga and anime Chobits, a great series that takes a look at the issues humanoid robots could cause in society, including a boy who puts his dead sister's memories into a Persocom, but realizes he can never recreate his sister. The first human/Persocom marriage, and what happens when the Persocom begins to malfunction and essentially dies. A woman whose husband slowly detaches until he locks her out of the house after they get a Persocom. A girl who's depressed because she doesn't believe she could ever be as good as a Persocom at anything. And of course, whether or not Persocoms actually have emotions and are quote unquote human or just robots. Damn, now I've got to go find my copy and reread it. So that's something else to check out about that. And then, of course, another person messaged on the SoundCloud and said, am I missing something, or did the guys at Google not watch Caprica? I didn't think you could patent something that was already in a TV show. Caprica had to do with the story of Eve. This was a prequel to the newer Battlestar Galactica series. And anyway, all that's probably worth checking out if you want to get some look into, what are the possibilities of all of this. So great comments about those stories, about the porn and the Google robots story. So this next one's from BitMessage, and this kind of touches on something that I'm going to get to maybe in the next episode. Maybe I'll save this question for episode 125. And that is country living versus city living. Okay. I've been asked, about my thoughts on that. And this kind of has to do, this question here, or this thought, I should say, kind of has to do with living out in the country, I think. So I'm going to read it here. An interesting thing happened to me recently. I was in an area of the country that was not friendly to cell phones. I had charged my phone that morning, and normally a full charge lasts me a week. However, in this case, the phone kept trying to find a signal, kind of like a computer searching for networks to connect to. By last night, my phone was drained. I suspect that it drained the battery looking for a signal that it never did find. In a place like New Hampshire, with so many liberty activists, this could be a plus. You have mentioned often that the people governments can't seem to get to are mountain people. In the mountains, cell service is often absent, as are any cell signals. No cell signal, no GPS tracking, even with the phone on. Makes sense to me. Thoughts? Yeah. So the idea that I've talked about, like where mountains, governments have a hard time catching people in mountains. In fact, the game company that made Hyperchronius, my game company, Zomia Offline Games, the name Zomia comes from an area in pretty much in Southern Asia where it's known as Zomia locally, because there's actually a book about it called The Art of Not Being Governed. And because effectively, the Chinese and any country around there just can't get their hands on these nomads, on these people, they can't tax them. They can't keep up with them. And the mountains are so, tough to navigate and to really make a presence in that they just more or less leave them alone. And also historically, there's a lot of quotes from a lot of, real empire type people who have said that, they worry when people run to the hills. And I mean, you can see there's a cultural narrative that people do run to the mountains when they want to get away from society. And sometimes it's because it's totally, by choice. They don't like what's going on. They don't like what their society is choosing. There's the Waldensians, which I've talked about. Also known as the Israel of the Alps. These were Christians that were running away from persecution from the Catholics. And they went to the mountains, they went into the Alps, and they lived, they moved on for centuries, and they got to enact their own principles. Okay, so there is historicity to the idea of going to the mountains. Now, the notion of, not having cell phone signal in the mountains, and that could be a good thing and you can't be tracked. Well, I mean, it's, but it's up to one's own choice. It really is. I mean, some people can handle the mountains, other people can't. Some people got to, be by the beach, or, they got to do whatever. And that's all up, to each person. Personally, I love the mountains. I would love to live in the mountains. I have lived in the proverbial mountains in the past. Okay. I'm a big fan. The only caveat I have here is that, like, GPS, GPS runs off of satellite. So I don't know that it would necessarily, like that could be a problem. Like GPS could be an issue, to where you could maybe still get tracked by that. Okay. But overall, the idea, and this, is something I've talked about on Sovryn Tech, and I think the listener is onto something if that's the comfort level that they want, is that, feeding less information and being in areas where that information can't necessarily get so well collected. Does that offer you some freedom? Yeah. Hell yeah, it does. It certainly does, emailer. I'm with you. And again, it's all up to choice. I mean, I imagine it'd be a hell of a lot easier if it was you and a group of friends, a sphere of influence that all got together and went up, and lived somewhere. But that's a choice, that you got to make. And I mean, overall, I think it's better to not rely so much on the, this constant connectivity. And again, I'm not going to some people have made the case to me to say that, using a smartphone is really like you're bolstering the state, certainly the surveillance state. And there's some truth to that, but that's not going to be me saying someone is immoral for having a smartphone. I have a smartphone. Okay. No one's going to make that, people are making that case. I'm not going to make that case, but to rely less on this sort of thing, absolutely. Or to try and take control of your smartphone or mobile device, like with Dark Android, with darkandroid.info, you can find out about how to do that. Abso-fucking-lutely. Do it, baby. It's exciting, to kind of, to regain. I mean, and I'm not saying, look, this might sound funny, but, I could, I don't mind. I'd walk around naked, I really don't have, necessarily like much to hide. Okay. I am who I am. But the problem is that attitude really, can often empower those that do have things to hide. And it can empower those in power. So, we can't live in the world with glass walls right now. Unless maybe, you go run off to the mountains, then maybe you can. So I love the idea of openness, and all of that. I really think that's a fine and dandy thing. But that openness when there are governments is something that's going to be abused. So you can either live away from it or somehow peacefully, nonviolently put an end to it. We'll see what happens. Let's see what other questions we got here. We got through those. Somebody asked me about Bitcoin because they felt like I was kind of on a tirade about Bitcoin. Look, folks, I love cryptocurrencies. Okay. The idea is amazing. Satoshi Nakamoto definitely changed the world. In fact, you'll read, I talk about it on darkandroid.info that I released this week. Go to that website. You can check it out. I talked about it. I said, it's like, Bitcoin cryptocurrencies is making all the ability to live in a decentralized, full dApps, decentralized, anonymous, private, secure way is in large part possible because of cryptocurrencies and cryptocurrencies alone, because that allowed for anonymous online shopping, really, and anonymous online transactions. I shouldn't just say shopping. Okay. So I love Bitcoin, but I just worry, and I'm not the first person and because this person was emailing me with a couple things. One is that, well, how would you solve it? Well, I've actually talked about how I'd solve what's going on with Bitcoin, is that you have parallel teams of development. You have a second team, a concurrent team that works, they work in concert. Okay. But then when one team starts to split towards the state, the other team takes over, and at that point, you go and use, Bitcoin version 1.1 anarchy, and then everybody else uses Bitcoin version 1.1 state. And people can choose, between that. What would that do to the value? Well, that's an economic thing. Okay. But I'd argue that Bitcoin's, precipitous rise in value to effectively to above $100. That's the one. That's the precipitous one that may have actually come from a market action, came from its utility to people that existed outside of the law. It had nothing to do with people that existed within the law. The rise to 1200, I've talked about many times, was because of a bot, a trading bot. Essentially, the Willie report, you can read about that. That's more or less confirmed now that was absolutely true. I called that like a year before it happened. Okay. So I think it would do just fine, because the thing that really brought Bitcoin's value up, and that is the people that exist outside of the laws that they live in within their respective areas, are still going to keep using it. They'll use version 1.1 anarchy instead of 1.1 state. Okay. So that's the solution there. Now, the person said, well, in Argentina, isn't it amazing what Bitcoin's doing in Argentina? Shouldn't you be a little, maybe you shouldn't be so hard on Bitcoin. Look, first off, again, I love Bitcoin. My products that I'm selling, please, you can buy them in Bitcoin. Okay. And I'm running a node. I'm not using Coinbase or BitPay and just feeding the centralization of Bitcoin. Okay. I'm running an actual node. It goes right to me. I love Bitcoin. Don't confuse me. In principle, I love it. What's happening with it is another story. What's happening in Argentina, that somehow people are taking on Bitcoin and it's saving the country. No, that's not happening. I mean, yes, that's happening, but it could have been anything. In my opinion, any currency could have walked into Argentina because the local currency, the legal tender of Argentina, is so much shit that you could have made mud coin and people would have jumped on it. Yeah, I know it would need an infrastructure of some kind, but that's my point, is that the people in Argentina are not like, oh, this Bitcoin. Well, they're not all just suddenly getting this incredible, ethical awakening of what that allows for. And that's certainly not what's happening in the colonies either, in the U.S. Nobody's, anybody accepting Bitcoin is just seeing it as, oh, okay, all right, so there's an alternative to Apple Pay. There's another way that I can make more money. Let me use that. They're not like saying, holy shit, the Federal Reserve's crazy. Why does that exist? No one's saying that. Okay, so in my opinion, what's happening in Argentina is not necessarily something of celebration. It is just a simple fact that it is such a desperate people for something. Yes, it's great that Bitcoin was there to fill in that need. Okay, but it's not like, they understood Bitcoin and jumped on it. It was just they needed something else to fix what's going on around them because it was just so bad. The economy in Argentina was just so much shit, they would have taken anything. So, no, I don't think Argentina is an example of how Bitcoin alone can save things. It's an example of how a more sound currency, a more sophisticated currency, a less controlled currency can save an area. Yes, it is certainly that, but it is not Bitcoin, it's not that. Bitcoin has that potential to do what we're talking about to some degree, to help free people and for them to have, a piece of property that's actually theirs that wasn't granted by a government or someone else. It has that potential, but that's really only possible when you actually educate people, even cursory, that you educate them on what Bitcoin is and how it works. Most people don't even understand that it's not just the currency, but it's also the payment processor. They don't get that. But that's the most basic, fact about Bitcoin is that it's both. And if people aren't understanding that, then they're not really integrating what exactly, using sound money and whatever else is all about. So that's what I mean when, please, I don't mean to trash it. And I hope I'm not the only one. Some very, really Bitcoin only people have said we need another development team to take over from what's been going on recently. Yeah, I hear what some of these guys say. Jesus Christ. I can't even think of anybody on the Bitcoin development team that I really agree with. I'll be back with more.
Are you sick of government lackeys who say you didn't build that? Are you tired of elitists like Barack Obama and Al Gore taking credit for the web while trying to take over the web? Are you disgusted by experts whose concept of the internet is that it's a series of tubes? Take back the free market of computing by encouraging software developers to adopt the BIPCOT No-Gov license. The BIPCOT No-Gov license allows any use or modification except by governments. Go to bipcot.org. That's Bravo, India, Papa, Charlie, Oscar, Tango.org.
Do you still have it?
Got it right here. How does this affect System D?
I don't know. The message just said it was important.
I think we need to find out more about this.
Tool of the Week.
It is time for Tool of the Week, where I talk about something that I find useful. Maybe it's a website, a product. It could be a piece of software, an app, whatever, a piece of hardware. You name it. And before I get into that, I want to... Because one thing, tool of the week every week could very well be cryptocurrencies. Okay, it might as well be in a large way because, like I said, I like them a lot. Okay, I think it's a very fine thing. And in fact, there was an article in Cointelegraph this week. I'll get to the tool of the week in a minute. It's a pretty funny one. It's an interesting one. Okay, but there's an article in Cointelegraph this week that had to do with, like people getting burned out on Bitcoin, like saying that they're just sick of it. And it laid out these reasons as to why people do it. Like it was scammers, it was the price, thieves. It went down like these 3 or 4. And I'm reading it, I'm saying, none of these are the reason that I get frustrated with Bitcoin or that I just want to, toss my hands up. None of it has to do with that. They never once mentioned regulation. And believe me, when they listed off thieves, they didn't list the government, which is the number one thief on the planet. Anywhere you go. It's called taxes, among other things. So, even the people that are like apparently burned out about Bitcoin, you want to talk about that there's not an understanding of what Bitcoin's about? Yeah, even the people that are burned out for all the wrong reasons. They don't realize what's causing everything that maybe they're burned out about. They're missing the whole point. Everything's way out left field. They've lost it. So, I get it. I think people want to chalk me up as somehow being one of those people that's burned out on Bitcoin. If those are the reasons, like Cointelegraph listed, I'm not one of those. I'm just burned out by people wanting to work with legacy banks, legacy governments, legacy companies, go down the list. That's what I'm burned out about. Anyway, let's get into this week's, enough of that. It's so funny. I said, I think a couple of weeks ago, I said, look, I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin, as much or really anymore. I just, why? And then somehow something always comes up and I end up talking about Bitcoin. Like it helps ratings or anything. Like I even care about ratings. So this is a very interesting story. Let's break into this. Now, if you listen to the intro of this show, one of the things that it says about me, other than that I'm an anarchist, is I'm the man in triple black. Or the man who always wears triple black. That's what it says. And this is true. It's one of the most common questions I get is, why do you always wear black? And I've answered it so many times, I really don't want to get into it again. Let's just say that now, since I've become an anarchist, over the past few years, it's what anarchists wear. It is. Look all around the world. They wear all black. It's what they do. So it just so happened that, the uniform fit. That's all. As far as the past reasons, believe me, they're all kind of ridiculous. So anyway, because I've been wearing black, triple black for a long, long, long time. But let's talk about that, because this week I saw an article, and it might be an older article, that talked about, let's see, the article title is, "This is Why Highly Successful People Wear the Same Thing Every Day." Now, I wouldn't begin to claim I'm highly successful right now. Okay. I wouldn't. I'm trying. Okay. But I'm trying really hard. But I wouldn't begin to claim that. But this is effectively the science of triple black. I shared this on social media, and I'll probably do a blog post about it on the Zog blog in the future. But this is it. And so I want to read about this. And so I'm going to skip Hacksec. We already talked about it with that Snowden story earlier anyway. So reading on, it's from lifehack.org, not Lifehacker. Aside from their tremendous impact on the world, their creative genius and their cult following, what do Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and Albert Einstein all have in common? Yes, you guessed correctly. They all have their own signature style that they wear every day. Ever considered doing so yourself? Here are some reasons why you might want to consider it. So I want to break into these reasons. And it's not, outlandish for me to do, for me to do a physical thing. Like I've done pens, I've done journalist equipment, all kinds of stuff for pick or tool of the week. So here's clothing. Maybe you want to consider, if not my sense of style, your own. Let's see. It's simple. Simple is often genius. Complicated is often dizzying. If you are like most Americans, you barely wear 80% of items in your closet. Instead of feeling constrained by the thought of picking a uniform, consider it a way to wear your unique look all the time. Your signature style is yours alone and can be as humdrum or unique as you like. Jeans and a turtleneck, gray suit or blue suit, chances are you have certain outfits you enjoy wearing more than others already, so you don't really have to think too hard. Simply define your own uniform. Buy more of what you love for each weekday and organize your closet accordingly. Give away the items that don't work for you anymore. And finally, have that organized closet you've been dreaming of. So that's one, is that it's simple. And I agree, it's very simple. I mean, you look in my closet and it's like a black hole. You just get sucked in. It's true. Anyway, decision-free zone. We make more decisions on a daily basis than ever before. Do we also have to choose an outfit each day too? Mark Zuckerberg enjoys the freedom his signature gray t-shirts bring him. Quote, I really want to clear my life to make it so that I have to make as few decisions as possible about anything except how to best serve this community, end quote. Whatever that means. But his point is the same, is that it gets rid of the decision-making process. With mornings being as harried as they are, zero decision making at the start of the day sounds quite liberating. Think of all the stress having a uniform could save. With all the talk about the aha moments people have in the shower, do you really want to be the person still mentally going through their closet when you could be mentally clearing the next big thing? Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, like one thing I never have to do, I never have to color coordinate. I was never good at it anyway. All right. But it's like, what are you wearing today? Black, you know? And even when you go to, you know, like there's so many stressors that it gets rid of, especially wearing triple black. You know, when you're doing laundry, you don't have to, you know, worry about light colors and all of there. What light colors? There's no light colors. It's black. Right. So there's so many ways that it's liberating as far as like getting decision fatigue, which is a real thing that people I definitely think should free themselves from. Next one, reading on, do the math. Just to be clear, no one is saying wear the exact same item day in and day out. That would be quite gross. Just have a basic uniform and tweak according to your lifestyle. Maybe it's chinos. Maybe it's cashmere. Work out how many of each you need to have a seamless flow of clothes ready for you each morning. If you wore a uniform in school, chances are you hated it, but it certainly made those mornings easier. So now that you get to pick your own uniform, why not give it a try? Next one, it saves money. By knowing what you wear daily, you can be sure to always have a few extra items of your choice saved away for a rainy day by stocking up when they're on sale. Closets become streamlined, packing for travel becomes a cinch, and you can even stash a few extra items at work. I'm going to kind of move quickly on some of these on the next ones. It boosts confidence and increased focus. All right, let's read this one. You know what items work for you in your body type, and you give the confidence and give you the confidence to focus more on your work and be a better team player. You don't need to be a team player. No need to wear the ill-fitting items just because you thought you bought them haphazardly because they were on sale or because they're the only clean clothes ready for you to wear that morning. By creating your own uniform, you are able to be stylish and comfortable every day. The next one is it's predictable. Above all, by defining and creating our own signature style, we are good to go on a daily basis with minimal effort or thought. Additionally, with all the craziness in the world, we can at least have the stability of knowing our daily uniform will be predictable. And for that reason alone, it very well may be worth it. So I think I agree, you know, largely other than maybe some of the incentives, I agree with largely what that said. And, you know, I mean, I love it. I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. You know, sometimes like I literally, as much as I can, granted, this is where it can get annoying, is that if something isn't black, it can be a problem, right? like my computer's black, like just about my glasses are black. My watch is black. Just about everything I have is black. So you don't have to go that far either. We're just talking about clothes, right? But I think even then, you know, in the fact that it's like, oh, it must be black, you know, even that makes it simple and sometimes helps you on, you know, making a quick decision when it comes to buying something as compared to taking a prolonged decision about it. Now, I mean, why do anarchists wear all black? It's because it's the same reason for the black flag. It means you're a person of no country because you don't believe countries exist. And so, you know, that's a pretty cool statement to make. It's certainly not a Johnny Cash type statement. There's a whole song about why he wore black. But yeah, I like it. Even in the summer, I deal with it. It's fine. You know, you put on a black hat, maybe a black kilt or something. I don't know. Take your pick. So yeah, try it out. You know, that's all I'm saying is that there is actually some degree of science and some good reasoning perhaps behind wearing what is essentially a uniform. Unfortunate word, but I'll take it for what it is. So I love it. Anyway, I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
Babylon 5 ended a great war and united 100 alien races in peace. Danger didn't die. It just went underground, with new heroes and new evils to carry the torch.
We need to make sure they all understand we will not be intimidated.
What is wrong with you people?
We have to pit him against himself.
It's an entire new season of Babylon 5 with all new episodes.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Oh, we made it. They're not kidding when they say you're the best, Mr. Sovryn.
Oh, Elizabeth, you haven't seen anything yet.
Oh, really?
Really? Why don't I show you?
Right here? Out in the woods? On the bike?
Elizabeth, I can rise to any occasion.
Ew, Brian. The climax.
It is time for the climax. And as you can tell, I skipped Hacksec this week. Now, used to be called Hacker Stories. But I skipped Hacksec. We talked about that pretty much during Tech Roulette this week, so kind of molded the two. And the climax is where I can talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. It doesn't have to anything to do with science or technology. And so oftentimes I will talk about something that is not science and technology. You know, maybe last week I think I talked about Terminator, or like the Terminator 2 DVD. I mean, I could talk about whatever. But this week I have a topic, and it's actually, I'll admit, it's a very serious topic that I want to discuss. One that kind of very much affects me personally. And it's, in many ways, it's kind of a longer story I'm going to be reading. The story is from The Independent, the United Kingdom. And it's a longer one, so I want to make sure I got plenty of time in to read it. So before I start reading it, what I want to share with you is that if you're a new listener and you're not aware of this, I am ethnically Jewish. I do not practice Judaism at all. Okay. The name Sovryn is Brian Sovryn. The name Sovryn is a name I chose. Actually, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy came up with it. So, and it is the name I use now. Okay. But it is a name I chose. I've had, my family names. I've got crazy Jewish names, Rothdiener, Kagan, and others. I mean, it gets nuts when you go down like the way that a lot of people within Judaism, track family lineage and all that. So I want to express that, and something, I'll save the rest for later, but I just want you to know, that about me if you didn't already. I don't hold it in necessarily any high regard per se, but it's there. And so I want to read the story from The Independent that came out this week, because I think it addresses something very interesting within the liberty movement, and really, even the world at large. But here we go. The story is The Rothschild Libel. Why has it taken 200 years for an anti-Semitic slur that emerged from the Battle of Waterloo to be dismissed? 30 years after the dust had settled on the fields of Waterloo, a poisonous anti-Semitic pamphlet circulated in Europe claiming the Rothschild family had accrued its vast wealth on the back of Wellington's triumph. The quote-unquote facts were entirely made up. Now, real quick, I just want to touch on, the Battle of Waterloo is pretty much where Duke Wellington of Britain kind of put an end to the Napoleonic Wars and Emperor Napoleon, his reign. So, essentially, that's the short and sweet version of that whole thing. And this is, in the early 19th century, or in the 19th century anyway. So let's read on with the story. In the summer of 1846, a political pamphlet bearing the ominous signature, Satan, quote unquote, swept across Europe, telling a story which, though lurid and improbable, left a mark that can be seen to this day. The pamphlet claimed to recount the history of the richest and most famous banking family of the time, the Rothschilds, and its most endearing passage told how their vast fortune was built upon the bloodshed of the Battle of Waterloo, whose bicentenary falls this year, because it was in 1815. Here is the story that, quote-unquote, Satan told. Nathan Rothschild, the founder of the London branch of the bank, was a spectator on the battlefield that day in June 1815, and as night fell, he observed the total defeat of the French army. This was what he was waiting for. A relay of fast horses rushed him to the Belgian coast, but here he found to his fury that a storm had confined all ships to port. Undaunted, quote, "Does greed admit anything is possible, or anything is impossible," end quote, asked Satan. He paid a king's ransom to a fisherman to ferry him through wind and waves to England. Reaching London 24 hours before official word of Wellington's victory, Rothschild exploited his knowledge to make a killing on the stock exchange. Quote, "In a single coup," announced the pamphlet, "he gained 20 million francs," end quote. Beyond all doubt, this tale was anti-Semitic in intent. Satan was in reality a left-wing controversialist called George Darnville, who made no attempt to hide his loathing for Jews and the Rothschilds in particular. Though they had been little known in 1815, by 1846 the Rothschilds had become the Rockefellers or the Gateses of their age, their name a byword for fabulous wealth. Nathan himself had died in 1836 and so could not rebut the claims. Every aspect of Darnville's tale, the ruthlessness, the guile, the greed, represents a derogatory racial stereotype, and he was writing at a moment when such attitudes were having one of their periodic surges of popularity in Europe. The story was also false. Nathan Rothschild was not at Waterloo or even in Belgium at the time. There was no Channel storm, and he made no great killing on the stock market. Yet the Satan pamphlet, translated into many languages and reprinted many times, gave this legend such a grip on history that, albeit often in modified or diluted forms, references to it can still be found today both in popular culture and in scholarly works. Versions appear in a Hollywood film of 1934 and the 2009 Sebastian Faulks novel, A Week in December, in past editions of the Dictionary of National Biography and Encyclopedia Britannica, and Elizabeth Longford's acclaimed 1970s biography of the Duke of Wellington, and with a very different analysis in Niall Ferguson's authorized history of the Rothschilds themselves. Perhaps more predictably, the story provided the plot for a Nazi film of 1940 entitled The Rothschilds, Shares in Waterloo, and the tale can be read on many anti-Semitic websites. How does a crude racist smear endure for so long? More importantly, how has it survived as a supposed subplot of history towards which even the most respected writers have felt obliged to nod when it is one of those myths that, on being challenged with inconvenient facts, simply adjusts its form? For example, when it was finally accepted that Nathan Rothschild was definitely not at Waterloo, the story changed. The banker was in London, but had made elaborate preparations to get the news first, either by special messenger or pigeon post. An additional twist was added. Once he knew Wellington had won, Rothschild was said to have deliberately provoked a collapse of the stock market by spreading false rumors of a defeat, so allowing him to pick up shares at rock-bottom prices and double his profits later, after official news of the victory had sent the markets soaring. Golden Stallion wants to butt in here. There's also a version that somehow he promised to, that essentially he went to, the heads of England and said, "You're going to be bankrupt here. I'll make you a loan. Just you give me England." And they said, yes. That's a very popular one in libertarian circles. Reading on. Was there any truth to this revised version or to any of the other variants that have surfaced over the years? We will come to that. The legend has had innocent uses. For example, the former CIA chief Alan Dulles repeated it in a 1963 book on espionage as he wanted to illustrate the value of early information. Other writers have adopted the tale simply as a good yarn without any anti-Semitic intent. Even the Rothschild family, always deeply uncomfortable with the story, has tried to domesticate it. Their preferred version glosses over any alleged profits and stresses that Nathan's first actions on hearing of the victory had been that of any good citizen of the time. He informed the government. This was the version Elizabeth Langford embraced. All the while, error and trickery were hampering attempts to separate the myth from the facts. What apparent evidence was there? For many years, historians cited a line from the London Courier newspaper dated June 20th, 1815, 2 days after the battle and a day before official news of the victory arrived. It stated simply, quote, "Rothschild has made great purchases of stock," end quote. On the face of it, this supported the legend, but there is a problem. Those words do not appear in surviving copies of that day's Courier. Instead, It now appears that the purported quotation originated in the writings of a Scottish historian, Archibald Allison, in 1848, 2 years after the Satan pamphlet was published. Further backing for the legend came in the form of an entry in the 1815 diary of a young American visitor to London, James Gallatin. On the day of Waterloo, he writes of great public anxiety over events in Belgium, adding, quote, "They say Monsieur Rothschild has mounted couriers from Brussels to Ostend and a fast clipper ready to sail the moment something is decisive on the battlefield, one way or the other." Once again, this is not what it seems. The Gallatin diary was exposed in 1957 as a fake cooked up in the late 19th century, long after the Satan story had gained currency. The first modern attempt to challenge the myth was made in the 1980s by a Rothschild Baron Victor, a retired scientist and public servant who wrote about his ancestor Nathan. It was Victor who identified the powerful role played by the Satan pamphlet, and he debunked many of the dafter allegations. But he also discovered in the Rothschild archives a document that muddied the water. This was a letter written to Nathan Rothschild by a bank employee in Paris about a month after Waterloo, and it included the statement, quote, "I am informed by Commissary White you have done well by the early information which you had of the victory gained at Waterloo," end quote. Proof, it seemed, that the legend had some foundation in fact. Their matters have stood since the 1980s, and in those years the old legend has enjoyed a new lease of life online, while historians and writers have continued to pay it lip service. But fresh evidence has now surfaced, which allows us finally to put this story in its proper context. Newspapers published in the week of Waterloo make it clear that the first person to bring authentic news of the victory at Waterloo to London was not Nathan Rothschild. Rather, it was a man who had learnt of it in the Belgian city of Ghent and made a dash to England. This shadowy figure, identified only as Mr. C of Dover, was telling his story freely in the city from the morning of Wednesday, 21st of June, at least 12 hours before the official news arrived. It was published in at least 3 newspapers that afternoon. We also know that a news report written that Wednesday evening referred to Nathan Rothschild receiving a letter from Ghent reporting a victory and passing his news to the government, though this was noted alongside reports of 2 other similar letters. So while it is confirmed that Rothschild had early news, he was not the only one. Did Rothschild have time to buy shares? Apparently. But in the thin market of the period, it could not have been enough to accumulate holdings sufficient to earn him the millions that Darrenville wrote of. Nor did he manipulate the market to double his gains, for contrary to legend, there was no slump in prices that Wednesday. Nathan Rothschild may have, quote-unquote, done well from his purchases when stocks rose sharply following the confirmation of the victory, but his gains were dwarfed by those of numerous rival investors who, without any advantage of early information, had bought key government securities earlier, more cheaply, and in quantity. 200 years on from Waterloo, then, not much is left of Satan's tale. It's just possible to see the factual elements upon which a vivid myth was built. Nathan Rothschild did have early information, and it seems he did buy shares. But it was only by taking these facts out of their relatively humdrum context and adding a heap of falsehoods on top. Relays of horses, storms in the channel, pigeon post, market manipulation. Lizard Jews! I put that one in. That a narrative of any interest was fashioned. There is no doubt why that was done. To smear the Rothschilds and Jews generally. Perhaps this bicentenary year of Waterloo would be a good time to recognize that smear for what it is. So I want to talk about this because from Alex Jones to whoever in, Liberty circles, Alex Jones is in Liberty, whatever, okay. A whole slew of people. Some of the ads even that I hear on Free Talk Live or whatever is all like, oh, those New York bankers. I mean, and we all know what that means, right? All of this stuff, all these conspiracy theories, David Icke and anybody that listens to him, all this different shit that comes out there, all based upon the fact that somehow these Jewish families, like the Rothschilds, had been pulling the strings. And I want to make something clear. The Independent is, a paper that often gets read by, the reporting gets taken as true, as accurate from a lot of people in liberty circles. And so when these inconvenient facts come up, I shared this on social media. And I thought it would have been really fascinating if a bunch of people maybe came out and said, holy shit, I was wrong. I've done that a lot of times. I've come out and said, I was dead wrong. And I've made some pretty impassioned claims that I was wrong about, and I still admitted it. The evidence stands up pretty well, and there's more than just that article. You can look into it. That this whole theory that somehow the banks have been pulling this and pulling that and doing this and doing that, and they're the grand evil of the planet Earth. Look, centralized banking, all that fractional reserve banking, all that shit, it's all bad ideas. Don't misunderstand me. I agree. It sucks. Okay? And I don't want it. That's why it's crazy when cryptocurrencies start working with banks. But this narrative that somehow there's these elites, and it's it's this genetic thing that these people might not even be human, that's been weaving its way in liberty circles is it's crazy. The proof doesn't stand up. The empiricism, I got the empiricism right here. I have the empirical evidence. Take a look. The guy didn't fund the wars. In fact, there was other families, or not families, but there was other people, other men, whatever, that took advantage, or, that maybe at least tried. In fact, the people that really made bank on it, we have the records to show that they didn't have any clue what was going on. They just made some good guesses. It was like a boxing match. They said, well, I think Duke Wellington might win this bitch today. I'm betting on Wellington. And that's all it was. It wasn't a grand scheme. Now there's a great book by G. Edward Griffin that I recommend anybody read. It's really, really well done. It's in its 5th edition for a good reason. It's The Creature from Jekyll Island. Yes, it's pronounced Jekyll. And in that book, G. Edward Griffin clearly states that, okay, at that point, yes, there was some degree of a plan to, do this and that with the banking system and with the economy and all of that. And I'll buy that one because the evidence stands up. But the interesting thing to point out is ask G. Edward Griffin about those bankers, about, those people that met at Jekyll Island, and he'll tell you they weren't evil people. They were very high-minded people. They thought they were doing a very good thing. It's absolutely clear in their own writings and their own words that they thought what they were doing was right. People want to talk about Carroll Quigley. He's the guy that supposedly was in with this elite group and all this stuff, and he wrote books about it. Okay? Tragedy and Hope, right? Carroll Quigley even says, I wish these people would just, not referring to this supposed elite, I wish they would just come out and say what they're doing, because then people would get it and they'd be like, oh, okay, you guys are, trying to help. What's really happening here, in my opinion, is that people, here it is. Life isn't fair. Some people can accept that, others can't. The ones that can't come up with wild fucking theories as to why it isn't. They get out of touch with reality. They create gods. They create lizard people. They create all kinds of, just notions that have nothing to back them up and have no basis in reality. And then they get more people who feel that life's taking a shit on them. And then, you start to feed those egos of these people. And then you start to give them money and you start to do this and this and, and eventually, you're living in a different world. you're not in touch with reality. And you're putting all blame and just re-expressing all your traumas externally instead of trying to deal with what's going on the inside. To get to the real answers why things are the way they are. You find those inside, not outside. I grew up, a pretty well-to-do family. I don't have anything to do with that family anymore. But I grew up with a pretty well-to-do family. I got accused of being a lizard person. That's not new to Sovereign Tech listeners. I've talked about that on the show. I've had to deal with all kinds of shit. I joined the military because of the 9/11 truth movement saying it was Jews that did this. And all of this largely stems back to this story about Nathan Rothschild supposedly making bank off of Napoleon versus Wellington in the Napoleonic Wars. And the story's not true. If the basis of your entire theory of history that's been going on isn't true, then what's left? You got to put that together. You need to answer for it. I can accept new evidence. Instead, what happens is, and this article lays it out very well, that people just start changing the story. Willy-nilly. They just toss in whatever new... okay, fine. Yeah, you're right. He wasn't at Waterloo, but now there was a messenger, and this messenger actually, he had this blimp made by Leonardo da Vinci himself and flew that to England. I mean, that's how it goes. And these people just come... There's nothing wrong with speculation either, folks, but you got to make it clear that that's speculation, and you don't go telling people how to live their lives or how to invest or how to do anything with their money or their families or whatever based upon speculation. That's how we get into all this trouble, is because people don't want to take a good, hard look at reality. And the good, hard look says that most of these conspiracy theories, their foundation isn't real. It's not true. And it's still getting spewed. And what I think people need to do is call these people out when they start talking about it and saying, no, that's not right. It's created racism. It's created all kinds of crap over the years. Not just Hitler. How about America? Hitler was just following a lot of Americans' examples in the early part of the 20th century. Go ahead, read up about it. Grab the works of Edwin Black. Take a good look at the evidence. America never stopped being racist it just expanded its racism to all kinds of people, Jews included. And I think a good chunk of the libertarian movement's doing the same goddamn thing. Because it makes it easy, right? And we don't have to read any more books. You don't have to do any actual research. You don't have to do any soul searching, proverbially. You don't have a soul. Because you can just blame it on someone else. Me? Tired of blaming it on someone else. I have to do something about it. For myself. And the only thing I can really control is myself. I wouldn't want it any other way. So I work on my own traumas, my own things that I had to deal with. And this is in many ways part of that. Coming to these realizations. That what people accused me of, just because, of who I was born to. I'm over it. So should everyone else be. If you appreciate what gets done on this show, please don't hesitate to check out the Support Us tab. Patreon, all that good stuff. Grab a copy of Hyperchronius if you haven't. It's a fun game, a good short ride. And check out darkandroid.info this week. Carpe Lucem, everybody. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.